Great to have you. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Holidays to everyone joining us now. Major Garrett, he's a CBS correspondent, a White House correspondent. Major Garrett gets to sit in the front row. Unlike me, we got to stand in the back, but we're moving up the chain there. But he's in the front row, formerly of Fox News. He's got a new book out called Mr. Trump's Wild Ride, the thrills, chills, screams, and occasional blackouts of an extraordinary presidency. I've read some of the book, haven't read it all, just got it the other day. But I was very pleased that I finally gotten a book that is not a Trump bash, a Trump sucks book. Finally, there's one out that's just telling the story about what is going on there. I can't wait to get through the remainder of it. And Major Garrett joining us now. Major, great to have you, man.
Great to be with you, and thank you for that compliment. I'm glad you found the book to be exactly what I want it to be, which is a book about what's happened. Not what that sounds scary, but didn't happen. There's a lot of that in Bob Woodward's book, a lot of that in Omarosa's book, a lot of that in Fire and Fury, Michael Wolff's book. And as I was putting my book together, I said, that's pretty crowded terrain.
Yeah.
I want to be someplace else. I want to be the place where I've always been, just a journalist covering the story. And there are all sorts of reactions I don't need to tell you, both positive, deeply positive, and deeply negative about President Trump.
Mm-hmm.
That's obvious. And I don't weigh into that either. I try to stand back from all that and just say, here's, in the first 18 months of this very amazing story that's playing out before our eyes, here's what actually happened.
Mm-hmm.
And here are the things to be with the country 2, 5, 10 years from now that already form the basic outlines of a Trump legacy.
Mm-hmm. This is why I'm enjoying it. I got through a third of it. Also, waiting for my first unnamed source. Everything you've got in there,
waiting.
I can't find one. That was the biggest shocker to me. There's got to be one in there.
In the book.
I want to tell our audience, that's the difference. This book, which I think might be the best book written right now on the actual presidency 18 months in, everything the Major did is on the record. If he's got a quotation, it's who said it, what his title is, what he was doing. Instead of these unnamed sources and innuendos that, you don't really know if it's true, false, or whatever, or people got axes to grind and all that nonsense. I mean, there's a book coming out by Chris Sims, I think, who served a buddy here and there that took notes, and I've understood that's all full of more innuendos, off the record nonsense. So this is a piece, if you just want to get a little insight into what is going on there, Mr. Trump's Wild Ride by Major Garrett. Now, Major, you're a White House correspondent like me. Of course, I got to stand in the back in the peanut gallery. You in the front row. You're in the front row, so we appreciate that. Look, I was probably the only person in the White House Correspondents Association that I didn't really like the way Jim Acosta behaved. I thought hogging microphones and asking 8 questions and being rude. I mean, I think there's a decorum there that's got to be followed. You've never done that. You ask your question. You ask a good question. It's not a gotcha. You ask a good question. Maybe you do a follow-up, and that's it. You give the microphone up to someone else. And you got a lot of grandstanders in there. And I know, look, both of us are there. But how do you fix that so that press briefing is what it's supposed to be, which is let's get information out to our viewers and to our readers and listeners that you just can't get through the regular news cycle, Major?
Well, that's the answer to your question is embedded in the way you asked it, which is how do you get information to the public? That's the basic metric by which I've always determined whether a question I ask a president works or not. Did the public learn something? Did the president make news? Did he say something about a topic or an issue or a person he's never said before that leaves a mark, that leaves an imprint, that changes either what the country knows about what the president's thinking, what he's going to do, or why he's doing it? And for me, the whole point of the question is to make news with the answer. And to your point about decorum, what's the best way to approach it? Well, if you're in there and you're getting in the way of the answer because your behavior is louder or more memorable than the answer, you've, to my opinion, to my way of thinking, defeated the whole purpose of asking a question. You don't get in the way of the process by which you get an answer and inform the public with that answer. So that's always been my approach. And like comedians, who don't critique other comedians' jokes, I don't critique other reporters' questions. It's a hard job. It's a unique situation. Everyone does it their own way. What I will say, though, is my standards are universal for me. They've never changed. They never will change. And I usually get really good answers from my questions.
True.
I put a lot of effort into the questions I ask, and those who I put the questions to know I put a lot of effort into my questions. Presidents know. I mean, President Obama once called me out very memorably, but a couple of other times said, Major, you really put these questions together in a really hard way for me to deal with. And I'm like, yes, of course. That's why.
What a great response.
You get a good answer that's a tough answer that makes you squirm a little bit. That's one of the best parts of the job.
So you ought to be teaching this at Columbia Journalism School, because a lot of the new journalists really don't get that, and it becomes very, for a lot of us in there that are a little bit older, that get the sanctity of being able to be there and ask those questions. And I appreciate that, Major, and thank you. And thank you for doing that. And you are one of the people there, I'll tell my audience, that when you're called on, I take notes. A lot of the other people, not so much. You know what?
I appreciate that very much.
I do. I take notes and use the answer and the question segment for my show the next day, because I know I'm going to get an insightful question and probably a pretty authentic answer. Because another thing you said is very telling here. It's the nature of the answer, the genesis of that comes from the question. And if the question is asked in a gotcha, confrontational way that obviously is for a soundbite on TV, you're going to get a confrontational answer, and you're getting nowhere. So I agree with that also. You know what was interesting study? When Spicer was there, Major Garrett, he experimented with press briefings off camera and on the record, but off camera, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know that attendance was half? So half the people didn't show because it was not on camera. Now think about that. If you truly want to get information out to the people, and
sure,
because it's not on camera, yet half the people don't show, what does that tell you about what that process has devolved into?
So I've actually been around the White House covering it since 2000. And back then, way back then, and this was true in the last year of the Clinton presidency, and it was true in the first year and a half of the George W. Bush presidency, and then things changed, as so many things did after 9/11. There was something we called the morning gaggle, and the morning gaggle was off camera, always off camera, on the record, in the press secretary's office, usually about 8:30, 8:45 in the morning. We would all trundle up there, door would open, we would all stuff ourselves in there, sometimes 30 or 40 reporters, to capacity, have our tape recorders out. They were really big back in those days.
Mm-hmm.
And take notes and get about 15 minutes of questions to the press secretary, all on the record.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the basic way for the administration to sort of get its message rolling in the morning, get questions answered on any overnight developments, either on the economy or international affairs, and sort of let everyone get their first breather and first go-round, all off camera, but very information-heavy. After 9/11, they became televised, and then they sort of just fell out of favor because the demands were so intense for information after 9/11, and the White House felt that it had to be on camera, and most people wanted everything on camera, and the whole gaggle process had sort of died out. Mm-hmm. And there was an experiment with it. I've suggested to this White House that they try to revisit that again, because I do think there is a way in which that off-camera process calms everyone down, maybe thins out attendance a little bit, gets the administration and the White House a little bit up and running. Here's what's coming at you. And we all sort of get information really early on, and we don't sit around and wait for the briefings. Now, the other thing we have to talk about is the briefings aren't happening that often anymore.
I know.
And I don't, and I always find that to be a sign of defensiveness of a White House. And I'm not sure this White House has a lot to be defensive about. There are certain people who believe that everything is sort of collapsing in on itself. I don't believe that. Mm-hmm. The president's going to be here for a good long while. Mm-hmm. The administration turns on. That's one of the themes in my book. The powers of the presidency are vast, and things happen. And even when there are lots of negative headlines, important things go on. Mm-hmm. And there's lots to talk about. Mm-hmm. But the infrequency of briefings now means the administration just doesn't make its point outside of the president. Mm-hmm. And I think that hurts them. I wish there were more daily briefings, for sure.
I agree with you. And, I mean, we had one yesterday, and I think the last one was about 2 weeks ago. So they went from
November 27th, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they went from every day to twice a week to once a week to now once every other week. I mean, to Sean Spicer's credit, and I was just with him this past weekend at an event. I mean, Sean had him every day. So it's like once every 10 days thing. I think it's a disservice. I agree with you 100% on that. I wish they would rethink that. We're with Major Garrett. He is a White House correspondent with CBS Radio, formerly from Fox News, and a very veteran journalist. He's got a new book out that I want to encourage you guys to take a look at. Mr. Trump's Wild Ride, the thrills, chills, screams, and occasional blackouts, extraordinary presidency. And it's all on the record. And it's not a bash Trump and, this Viper said that to that Viper. It's just, here's what happened. And it's the only book in its space of its kind. I've gotten through 1/3 of it, so I didn't read it all. But as I was saying earlier, 1/3 through the book, I still haven't found my first non-source quote. And Major says, I'm not going to find any. So I think it's a great story to be told, and very authentic and very real, and gives you insight into what is going on without the bias of the other books written by some of the other authors that obviously had an agenda. Major Garrett, I've only got a minute. Just your take on impeachment going forward. There's 17 investigations now going on with the president. As an analyst, how do you see this playing out?
Well, it's going to be a tough 2019 for this White House. There's no question about that. Democrats are going to investigate a lot of things. And if there are things that are uncovered that are problematic, people are either going to lose their jobs or the president's going to suffer politically. And some people already have lost their jobs. I think Ryan Zinke is a casualty of the coming scrutiny that the House Democrats are going to put on the Interior Department. I don't think there's any question about that. Others may go as well. And that's just going to be a political reality for this White House. But as everyone knows, President Trump is an exceptional and willing counterpuncher. And House Democrats, I think, fundamentally understand, and if they don't, they soon will, that just because they investigate doesn't mean the president's going to sit back and take it. And so that's going to be a raucous part of the politics of 2019. And that doesn't also mean things won't get done. I still predict things will get done. There'll be bipartisan compromises, and how we figure out how to avert a government shutdown will be the first effort of that bipartisan spirit.
Can he get reelected?
Certainly he can. Most incumbent presidents do. That's the statistical norm, actually, in our country. And any incumbent president goes into reelection with as the favorite. Now, George Herbert Walker Bush is an exception to that. But most presidents who are seeking reelection win. And I know a lot of Democrats think that they can win and mobilize, but you got to be somebody with something. And right now, they don't have the someone. They have 20 or 25 someones and no someone yet. And coalescing the party will be its biggest and most important, not only priority, but obligation. But the president will go into that reelection campaign, I think, if not strong, certainly the odds-on favorite.
And the Democrats also, right now today, have no cohesive message. That's the other issue. Didn't hurt him in the House midterms, but you get to 2020 with Trump on the ballot, they're going to have a message. So far, I haven't seen one. Major Garrett, fascinating conversation. Hope to have you back. Thanks for being with us. Hey, buy his book, Mr. Trump's Wild Ride. You can get it B. Dalton Bookstore or Amazon or wherever else you want to go. Make a great Christmas present. Mr. Trump's Wild Ride, Major Garrett. Major, thanks for being with us.